I'm MPs. So, as most of you know by now, on March 18th of 2018, a so-called young black man by the name of Stephon Clark was gunned down by the Sacramento Police Department, which has precipitated an uprising that was instigated by the Discordian group known as the Black Lives Matter group, aka the Black Lesbians Matter group. They decided that they were going to make ground zero of many of their protests in Sacramento in front of the Sacramento Kings Stadium, which prompted the owner of the Sacramento Kings, Mr. Vivek Ranadive, to eventually kowtow and conform to their demands and make certain promises that he's going to assist in the quote-unquote upliftment of the black community in Sacramento. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
This is SportsCenter right now. Police and the Sacramento Kings are preparing for more protests tonight after the funeral for Stephon Clark.
Let me say this about the quote-unquote murder of Stephon Clark. As many of you brothers already know, he was killed on March 18th of 2018. So clearly there's an allusion there to the number 666. There are so-called black men that get gunned down every day by the cops. There are Caucasians who get gunned down every day by the cops. They pick and choose which murders they want to project out to the masses across America based off of certain numerical high days. That is how they communicate to those in the know. So am I saying that Stephon Clark was purposefully killed by the cops? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that he just happens to be a so-called black man who was killed on a certain day. And they utilize the numerical aspect of that day to project this story out to the masses at large across America and to give the so-called Black Lives Matter group, which is a Saturnian organization, meant simply to exalt the black lesbian, to give them a reason to gain the limelight once again. But anyway, this story is more about Mr. Ranadive, so we're going to concentrate on that aspect.
An unarmed black man who was killed by police in his grandmother's backyard on March 18th. During 2 of the past 3 home games, protesters have blocked the entrance to the Kings Arena. In response to this situation, the team announcing they are creating an education fund for Clark's children. Also, they're partnering with the Build Black Coalition and Black Lives Matter Sacramento with hopes to help, quote, fundamentally transform black communities through deep investment in black youth in Sacramento.
Let me say this very quickly. The only way to fundamentally change or alter or improve the condition of quote-unquote black youth in these various communities is for the so-called black man to start using greater discretion in who he chooses to have a child with. That means what? You must put down the weed. You must put down the excessive amounts of alcohol. You must decide that you're going to improve yourself incrementally. It's not going to happen in a day, but your improvement, your exaltation, what you need to be a functioning member of society and also productive for yourself is never going to start with the next man helping you. It's always going to start with yourself. So so-called black men must understand that, and they cannot allow themselves to subscribe to the paradigm of help me. You must help yourself first. Even in the so-called Christian church, they tell you that God helps those that help themselves. That's one of the few credos that actually are relevant. You must help yourself before you demand or ask or require assistance from anyone else. So-called black man, the solution is within you. It's not going to come from any group or organization.
For more on this, let's get you back to First Take.
All right, so as we just heard from Antonietta, the Sacramento Kings and Black Lives Matter teaming up to transform Sacramento community. Stephen A., want to...
That truly was just meant to be some positive PR for the Black Lesbians Matter group. That's all that's about. All Vivek Ranadive is going to do is most likely donate about $50,000, and they're going to open up a community center, have some high-tech computers there for some little black kids to go to and clickety-clack on their keyboard for about 2 hours a day after school. That's not the problem in the so-called black community. The main problem is that there is a role mismanagement within the household. So-called black man, you have to take back control of your home. How does that start? You have to empower yourself by making sure that you can produce your own funds, that you can provide for yourself, that you can pay for your own mortgage, for your own rent. And then you add on to yourself a female who is productive and whose intentions are pure and who wants to add onto you as opposed to take away from you. then you produce a child. You can raise that child up in an orderly fashion. That's how it goes. It's not going to come from Vivek Ranadive donating a 5-figure or a 6-figure check. None of that shit is going to resonate in 10 years. That's why these situations keep happening. Because our people are not attacking the root of the issue. They're only attacking the branches. But once again, so-called black men, the solution is within you. It's not going to come from anybody else. No one else.
I want to start with you on this one. What's your reaction to this partnership?
I applaud it. I think it's something that needs to happen. Let's be clear. The Black Lives Matter movement
is discordionist. It promotes chaos and anarchy. Basically what they do is they try to intimidate other people into adhering to many of their personal philosophies. They want to gain a form of mass acceptance because they're being bankrolled by foreign powers, particularly Mr. George Soros. We all know that. As I always state incessantly on this channel, for those of you brothers who really want to know what the Black Lives Matter movement is about, go on their website and they'll tell you. They do not care about you, so-called black man. They're only using you to gain attention and acclaim for themselves. They truly just want to put the so-called black woman, especially the lesbian black woman, in an advantageous position over you, which she already is. But they want to cement that. They want to make sure that the image of the so-called black woman, especially the so-called black lesbian, as a leader and a goddess, is firmly ingrained and implanted in your mind. That's their end game.
It came in the aftermath of Trayvon Martin, shooting of Michael Brown, obviously. The fact that there's been an outcry for racial equality, and
which there is no such thing as racial equality. So-called black man in a race, if you're running a race, you don't race to come out in a tie. You race to win. Please understand that. When you understand that it is a competition, you race to win. You don't race to come out in an equal tie. That is BS.
To eradicate racial injustice. And we all know that that's a problem that exists within the United States of America. We just know this to be true.
The main issue that exists within the United States of America, within the so-called black community, is that the so-called black man has been disenfranchised. He's been told that he's not leadership material. So-called black man, you must reclaim the leadership mantle, period. What does that mean? That means that anyone who tries to rebuff you, tries to resist you as the leader in your own community, is enemy of your community, and that includes the so-called liberal black woman. What many of these protests are nothing but red herrings. They want to distract you from who you are. They want to make you think that you should always be in fear of everything around you. You can't be a leader and always be scared of everything and everybody. It doesn't work like that. And the main thing that they want to do is make you think that you have no way to empower yourself. So, therefore, you must always beg those who already have power for some of their power, as opposed to trying to accrue your own. But the main thing that you have to do is discipline yourself. That's why, once again, you must put down that weed, put down the excessive alcohol, put down the video game module, whatever the hell it is, and figure out what you want to do with your life and go about actionizing your plan. Period. And stop having children that you cannot provide for. Okay? That's why they end up falling prey to many of these disastrous situations within the so-called black community, becoming gang members, prostitutes, convicts. Why is that? Because there's not a proper framework in the house. And I always get these guys that come on my channel, oh, well, just because you have a 2-parent home, it doesn't mean because, look, it is not preferable for you to be raised in a so-called single mother home. The mother has very little control over the children after they get to be about 12 or 13. It's your job to make sure, number one, I'm not one of these guys, oh, well, you got to be in the home, you got to be a part of the child's life. No, sir. You have to make those decisions years in advance. You have to make sure that you plot out the type of woman that you want to have a child with, and you have to make sure that you search her out over the course of years diligently so that you know what type of female you're impregnating, because DNA makes a major difference. You guys run around, you skeet up in these wild little silly thoughts that's running around out here, and then you wonder why your child is born and rises and grows and ends up being reprobate because you sowed your seed in defiled soil. So that's a you issue, so-called black man. Stop looking for everybody else to change. It's all about you. Once you get yourself together, once we get ourselves together, then we can start paying attention to these other demographics and these other issues. And we can move as one unit. That's how it has to be. There's too many disparate philosophies going around out here because everyone else just wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be seen and push their own personal ideology, shit that's not going to work.
So when you look at it from that perspective and you take into account the fact that the NBA is a league that's predominantly African American, when you listen to the rhetoric that has been spewed in the direction of even somebody like LeBron James, who obviously is the biggest sports iconic figure, arguably in the world right now, and he was still told to shut up and dribble.
Yes, because that's what he does for a profession. He dribbles. That does not make him qualified to speak up on issues that he knows nothing about or cannot speak about in depth. Beyond that, he's a corporate asset. He runs his mouth because Nike tells him to do so. That's the only reason why LeBron runs his mouth.
When you've got Kobe Bryant, who's a 5-time champion, that wins an Oscar, and he goes up on stage and reminds the world, I guess some of us can do more than just dribble.
Yes, what Kobe's able to do is make an animated short as part of a production company where he very blatantly promotes Luciferianism, because Kobe Bryant is a Luciferian. Nothing against him, but Kobe never made any statements pertaining to issues regarding so-called black community while he was playing. Now, if he wants to expand his scope and his realm after he is retired, maybe he feels like he's more free or has more liberty to do so, then that's fine. But it is also incumbent upon him to make sure that he's informed on the issues at hand and actually has real solutions, as opposed to just pleading for quote-unquote equality, which is what so-called black people love to do. There's no such thing as equality. You're either above or you're below.
What you're alluding to, what you hear them alluding to, if not speaking towards directly, is the fact that black men are viewed in a very, very different light, and the lives of black folks don't appear to matter.
Well, here's the question. It's much easier for the lives of anyone, not just so-called black men, to matter to them when our people's lives matter to ourselves and to each other. When you decide that you're going to project a certain image for yourself as a quote-unquote gangster or whatever it is, what you're basically telling everyone around you is that you don't value your own life, because everyone knows that the lifespan of a gangster or criminal is very, very brief. So when you're doing that, that shows other black people that you don't value your life. That is why so-called black men walk down the street and they look opposite each other and they're grilling each other up and down, because they don't value their own life. I'm not concerned about how the other races view me or value my life. I value my own life. When you value your own life, that means the Most High values your life, because you're going to conduct yourself in a way that shows him that you're concerned about what he thinks, what the Most High thinks about you, and therefore he's going to give you greater grace while you're here on the earth. And he's going to allow you to not get caught up in BS situations, because you're concerned about how the Heavenly Father views your conduct. And of course, I'm speaking anthropomorphically, because we already know that the Most High is omniscient. He knows all. But just for our own understanding, and in the earthly form, we want to appeal to the Most High's ways. That will allow other people to respect you more, and not even worrying about how they feel about you. This is an intra-community issue. This is not an extra-community issue. So-called black people do not want to discipline themselves and make sure that their community is on the up and up. They're more worried about how these other races feel about them, even though our people, for the most part, in many of these more rundown communities, want to conduct themselves in a degenerate fashion. And those are the facts. People may want to spin it however they want, but Stephon Clark was not walking home from work holding his daughter's hand, eating an ice cream cone. He was jumping over fences, doing whatever he was doing. Once again, people may not like that. It is what it is.
As much. Now, you're going to have people out there, dissenters, that try to talk about numbers and what have you. And I don't even have the time to get into that today, because this is only a few minutes. This segment's only going to span a few minutes.
The main reason why Caucasians and other races like to come at black people with numbers is because they know that you're concerned about how they feel. So they know that it's very easy to get you caught up in a circular conversation. That's why I tell certain people who come on my channel, I don't get caught up in the circular racial conversation. You know why? Because I don't give a fuck about how you feel about me. Not even a little bit. My channel is geared towards the so-called black man. Period. So there's certain things that I don't get caught up in. If you're not here to bring a certain positive vibe, you can have a nice day. Because my concern is not anything other than that. That's who my channel is geared towards. Once you prop the so-called black man up, then he knows what he can do for his own inner circle, and then it trickles outward. That's how that works. You have to understand the chain of command. You have to understand the process. So that's one of the main reasons why you have these Caucasians. They come on these different channels. Oh, well, according to FBI stats, black people do this, black people. I don't give a shit about all that. You have to be concerned about making sure that the so-called black man understands where his mind needs to be so that he can be productive for himself.
But what I would say to folks in white America and beyond is ask this simple question.
Well, this is the problem. You keep asking quote-unquote so-called white folks stuff. Who gives a shit?
We've seen an Uber driver shoot folks in Michigan. Somehow he was arrested. We see numerous folks from the white community transgressing and committing crimes against law enforcement officials. They get arrested. In other words, they live and they get to have their day in court. The issue in question, when we talk about the disparity of black lives as opposed to white lives that find themselves gunned down by law enforcement officials, the issue in question is that why is it that folks like the Michael Browns of the world, like the Castillos and Minnesotas of the world and others, end up losing their lives?
Well, here's the question that I have for people like Stephen A. Smith, who I believe is mostly posing in this segment because he knows that if he speaks out against the so-called Black Lives Matter movement or Black Lesbians Matter movement, he's going to be called a coon and all this other stuff. Here's my question for Stephen A. Smith and anyone who's aware of the history of this country. Why do so-called black people keep looking to Caucasians for them to establish equality when they've never done that in the history of this country? Why would they do something that they have not done over the course of the past 3+ centuries? Why are you concerned with them? We have to establish our own standards. We have to uphold our own morals. The real conundrum for the so-called black community is that our people know inherently that we don't have a real culture. So we don't have a framework to work from. Therefore, we must constantly appeal to the Caucasian to bring order in our communities. In other words, you're like a child to the Caucasian. Any man that always feels like he has to appeal to another man to gain insight on how he should rule himself, you're like a child to that man. Just from a spiritual perspective, if you have to go to someone as a guru or as an instructor, you're like a child to that man. And that man's job is to raise you up so that you can become an adult, proverbially speaking, and govern yourself. Now it's time for the so-called black man to throw off the shackles of always having to depend on the Caucasian for relevance, for validation, and look inward within himself to rule. How can you call yourself a king when you're always looking to the so-called white man to tell you that you're equal to him? Really what you're saying is that you are a paragon of virtue for me, so-called white man. How come you won't accept me within your inner sanctums? How come you won't tell me that you love me? It's like Will Smith in that episode of The Fresh Prince asking his Uncle Phil, how come his dad don't love him? As long as you have that mentality, that the so-called white man will never respect you. Nor should he. Nor should he. So, once again, it all goes back to the so-called black man.
And then this latest incident, this kid, Stephon Clark in Sacramento.
And let me also say this. Let me also remark on Stephen A. Smith's statements about why it is viewed differently when a so-called black man is arrested and he's killed as opposed to a Caucasian who's arrested without incident. Well, first off, you do have Caucasians that are shot by the cops. That's just not promoted by the mainstream liberal media because they want to keep the so-called black man's mind distracted on fear-mongering in regards to the police, making the so-called black man think that he has to be scared of every cop. But beyond that, once again, so-called black man, this is not our rest. This is not our kingdom. This is our captivity. So you must understand that the treatment is going to be different. Once the so-called black man starts to truly look at himself as a king, then we can get our own kingdom and we can rule according to our codes. Why do you continuously expect the so-called Caucasian to treat his the same way that he would treat yours? Of course, he's going to treat his own with preferential treatment. That's called rulership. That's called rulership. Like a lot of these guys, these pro-black guys, I don't know who they're trying to impress. They come in my comment section. Well, how could you say that? Look at what they did to Emmett Till. None of that shit is impressing me. We can go back to the 1800s and talk about things that were done to so-called black people during Jim Crow, during slavery, so on and so forth. Right now, we're in 2018. What are we going to do right now? If you're that indignant about what occurred against Mr. Emmett Till or against anyone else who was victimized in this society, then do something about it. It's like if your mother's walking down the street and somebody jumps off around the corner and beats her and sexually assaults her. There's one of three things you could do. You could do nothing. You could find that man and do something to him, or you can go to the police. But just walking up and down the street talking about what somebody did to your mother, that's not impressing me. That's not a sign of being so-called pro-black. That's just a sign of you being a simpleton. No disrespect. It is what it is. But there's only so long that the so-called black man can keep complaining about shit that happened and not be willing to do something about it. And now you got these guys here walking down the street approaching the police with T-shirts on and, looking like ninjas. Are you going to fight the cops? What are you here to do? Are you here to make a spectacle of yourself? This is what I'm talking about. Too many of our brothers do not understand the importance of strategizing. And strategizing starts within the home, what you're doing with your woman, what you're doing with your children, and making sure that you have planned out your life before you make certain decisions. That's why I always try to harp on that with many of you brothers, man. Make sure that you know who you're having a child with. That's where it starts. It don't start with little spectacles like this. This shit looks silly to me because it's not going to change a damn thing.
Was in his backyard holding a cell phone. Relatives, witnesses, those within earshot said they never heard the police tell him to drop whatever it was in his hands.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, quite frankly, that's not relevant, sir, because we're living in a day and age of surveillance. We already have the footage from the cops' cameras. We already have the footage from the helicopter. They did tell him to drop something, but the issue is that as soon as they told him to drop it, they started to let off their weapons. Now, according to the autopsy performed by Mr. Bennett Omalu, for those of you who don't know who he is, Bennett Omalu came to fame by executing many of the studies that were done on the brain injuries within the NFL and formulating the concept of CTE. Anyway, he was able to perform an independent autopsy on the body of Stephon Clark, and he determined that he was shot in his back. The majority of the bullets went into his back. But as we know by seeing the footage, he was spun by the initial bullets that hit him because he was approaching the police officers. That's the bottom line of it. Brothers, once again, you can allow yourselves to be led by these women, these females, these lesbians, these homosexuals. As you can see, and I'll be doing another video on this, there's a reason why they're exalting Stephon Clark's brother. It's very clear. As I've been telling you, brothers, for a very long time, the Black Lives Matter movement is really just a front organization to promote black homosexuals and lesbians. And anyone can see what Stephon Clark's brother is. That's why he's on Front Street right now. But at the end of the day, you can never expect to be treated as well as your oppressor's own children. So our people have to put our children and our own on the same pedestal that these other races put their children and their own. That is how you get self-respect, and that is how the other races start to respect you if you're that concerned about their respect. But that's the only way that occurs. Getting respect from others does not come from you asking them for it. It comes from them understanding that you respect yourself. That's why I use the analogy of a bully. You cannot appeal to a bully's sense of righteousness. You have to show a bully that they must respect you by whatever means that is. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times you have to get violent with a bully, but you have to speak their language. The other races understand that this is indeed a race. It's a competition. They're trying to defeat you, so-called black man and woman. When they open up businesses in your neighborhoods and you make them rich, they're defeating you. That's the point. All right? And that's the bottom line of it. All this marching and attention mongering that Negroes do, it gets them nowhere. It's repetitive. It's circular. Look at this chick in the photo here in the middle. She's doing all this marching. That's probably the most exercise that she's gotten in years. Health is a major issue. That's one of the major reasons why our people's brains don't function how they're supposed to. Because they're filled with all these toxic foods.
He was in his backyard. He was shot and killed. And we learned that they shot at him 20 times. That doesn't make any sense. And when those kind of things transpire, definitely something needs to be done, something needs to be addressed. And what I love about this with Black Lives Matter, Max.
Before Stephen A. continues, I keep hearing this from a lot of the social justice Negroes. They keep talking about something needs to be done. Unless you know exactly what needs to be done, don't use the term something. If you're solution oriented, you'll state what exactly needs to be done. It's not about something needing to be done. The reason why those cops have been put on leave with pay is because they were following protocol. Their protocol is to tell an assailant or a suspect to get down on the ground, raise their hands, whatever. If someone charges you, turns, and pulls anything out of their pocket, they are going to fire off. And there are many videos of Caucasians being fired off on. Now, as Stephen A. states, of course, there are many, many instances where there's Dylan Roof, who shot up the black church, and of course, he's taken with no incident. There may be other reasons for that. Most likely, Dylan Roof was a Manchurian candidate, but that's another video for another day. That's another issue for another day. Point being is this: you cannot grade how the law enforcement treats so-called black people against how they treat so-called Caucasians, because they do not view the so-called black man the same. Our people keep chasing this magical, mystical carrot that's going to make the Caucasian look at them in the same way that he looks at his own. That is not going to happen. The real issue is, when are you going to look at your own with the same esteemed light that the Caucasian looks at his children? Because here's what I know for a fact, especially living here in New York City, and many other brothers can testify to this. When you see a black woman babysitting a white man's child, she treats that child with the love and respect and exaltation that one would wish she treated her own child with. How many times have you seen a so-called black female walking down the block with her own child, and the child is trailing 5 feet behind, and she's paying no attention to the child? But when she's babysitting a Caucasian man's child, she has the child in front, in the stroller. She's patient. She's kind. Why is that? It's not just because she's under the employ of that Caucasian. It's also because she venerates the Caucasian and their child. So the issue is self-image. It's about how you look at yourself. It's not only about the so-called Caucasian and their maltreatment of the so-called black man.
In concert with the Sacramento Kings, and I applaud Ron Adive, the owner, speaking to the crowd the other night and taking steps to address the issues within that community. He and the NBA community deserve to be applauded for that. What I wanted to point to is the fact that you've got this going on, and what we have to applaud Black Lives Matter for in this particular instance, again, there's a clear opponent. During the presidential election, they had their issue, but they didn't take a side. You know, they treated...
Because they were not a political organization, Stephen A. Smith. They're a quote-unquote activist organization. As I told you, brothers, already, all an activist is somebody with a big mouth looking for attention. They have no plan. They never had a plan. And to be quite frank with you, it's not anybody's job to choose a political side, because the vast majority of these politicians are bought and paid for. People like Bernie Sanders, he's nothing but a Zionist. It's all he is. And if you notice, during these so-called presidential election or selection, all the liberal women were running behind Bernie Sanders. Why is that? Because he's an older so-called Caucasian Jew, and he's a globalist. And he's under the employ of the banksters, believe it or not.
Trump the same way they treated Hillary, the same way they treated Bernie Sanders when he was at a press conference or he was at a rally or something like that. No, you have to pick a side, because when you pick a side, that's when you are able to rally people to your cause. No, that's not true. You have to create your own side. That's how you get people to rally to your cause, when you're solution oriented. No problems with what they're doing here. I think it's apropos in light of what transpired, and I applaud their efforts.
Of course, because you don't want them to, you don't want them to fill up your Instagram and your Facebook accounts and Twitter with you being a coon. That's why.
I want to preface what I'm saying by saying the Black Lives Matter, which I broadly support.
Of course you do. You're a Caucasian Jew, super liberal, and they're discordianist, and so are you.
There's an affiliated group, the Movement for Black Lives, and I brought this up at the time when it occurred, that came out with a political platform. And I don't agree with everything in their political platform, and I suspect that, once someone has a political platform, no one really agrees with every single thing in it.
I believe that Max Kellerman is talking about many of the tenets of the more strident aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is talking about reparations and opening the cells of political prisoners and blah, 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 a bunch of silly shit that was never going to happen to help promote their racialist altar and hide the fact that they truly were just trying to promote lesbianism and homosexuality. They were talking about reparations and you know, we have to free political prisoners, you know, all this nonsense that they knew damn well was never going to happen.
That's one of the problems with having a political platform, Stephen A.
And yes, I said that reparations is nonsense. And a lot of you so-called pro-blacks will get mad at that because most of you are like Dorothy in the Land of Oz. You just talk shit all day. You're in your own fantasy world. Do you understand what it means for the so-called black man to get reparations? Do you understand the in-depth DNA and genealogical research that they're going to have to do to determine if you were actually the descendant of slaves? Do you understand that they will have to literally empty their bank vaults? It's not a matter of giving every Negro a $500,000 check. It don't work that way, dude. Doesn't work that way. What you're asking for, you really don't have any comprehension of. People will say, well, how come the Caucasian Jews could get reimbursement after World War II, after the so-called Holocaust? That's because they control the banks. It was already preordained that they were going to use World War II and the Holocaust, quote-unquote Holocaust, to stipulate the recreation of a pseudo-homeland for the Caucasian Jews. That's what the British Mandate was about.
When you have a kind of broader social movement that everyone should be, with good conscience, should be able to get behind. So I want to preface what I'm going to say by that.
And beyond that, let me say this. There is no money. So even if they were going to give reparations to so-called black people, they don't use real money. There is no real money. Once again, so-called black man, the only solution is turning back to the Most High and establishing our own kingdom. That's it. Period. And in the meantime, making sure that you're a productive member of your home, that you can provide for yourself, that you can pay your own rent, your own mortgage, your own way. That's how you regain your manhood. And you utilize great discretion in picking the woman that you're with. Bottom line.
Black Lives Matter has been a very important movement that continues to do very important work. And if you want to know the difference between the NFL and the NBA right now, when you talk about the fact that the NBA is a predominantly black league, the African-American league, well, so is the NFL. So 70% African-American. Yep.
Absolutely. I made that point in my previous video. It's interesting that people look at the NBA as a black league and they don't look at the NFL as a so-called black league. But that's mostly because the Negroes in the NFL are not allowed to exude any type of individual expression. In the NBA, they're a woke league. People associate liberalism and woke with being quote-unquote pro-black.
Yeah, it's predominantly African-American. Yeah. You want to know the difference between the NFL and the NBA right now?
Yes, the NBA is woke. The NFL is resisting the woke programming.
Kaepernick can't get a pro day, but the Kings are supporting Black Lives Matter or working in conjunction with Black Lives Matter.
Well, that's not really the difference between the NBA and the NFL. That really just is more revealing on your lack of understanding of the situation at hand, Max Kellerman, and the difference in culture. Kaepernick is not supposed to get a pro day. He's supposed to do what Johnny Manziel did, which is attend a pro day and ask the receivers there if he can throw for them. If he truly was interested in becoming part of the NFL, who the hell is he to get a pro day all for himself? At best, he's a potential backup quarterback with mental issues, who's going to be used as a plant by his handler, Ness Nitty. So, miss me with that bullshit. In regards to Vivek Ranadive, he was gangstered into agreeing to assist the so-called black community in a way that's really not going to assist them at all. It'll be a tax write-off for him. And once again, he'll probably just create a little community center. It'll be a place for little black boys and girls to go to, clickety-clack on their computer, and most likely be taught that it's okay to be a lesbian and a homosexual. That's what the center will be used for.
That's the difference right now. And by the way, one league is ascending and one league is descending. Allegedly.
But that just shows you that Max Kellerman, as I stated, is a discordionist because he's rooting for the fall of the NFL. Why is that? Because they're not as woke as he wants it to be. The NFL is operating according to a totally different paradigm and on a much higher level. And had they just removed Kaepernick from the NFL once he started his protest, that would have nipped a lot of this shit in the bud. I made a video a while ago in regards to when Donald Trump first made the statements that he made that inflamed all the NFL and pretty much forced their hand into a mass protest. The reason why he did that was because he wanted to smoke out the owners who were tolerating that nonsense. Be men and remove the people who are costing you your bottom line.
Now, I want to be very clear about this. I am not here stating that it is causal, that the NFL doesn't support Kaepernick and therefore it's descending, and the NBA and Renedive, who again is an owner I've been very critical of in terms of his ownership of the Kings, I don't think he's been good, but this is a very good thing he's doing.
It's not a good thing that he's doing. It's necessary. Period. Bottom line. In more ways than one, it's about the bottom line. He knows that if he does not satiate the Black Lesbians Matter movement, they're going to ratchet it up. And he's already struggling in regards to attendance. So this is the last thing that he needs.
And he deserves enormous credit. My hat off is to him. My hat is off to him. But Renedive and the Kings are reacting this way, and the NBA is ascending. Now, are those two things correlated? Yes, they are. NFL going down, NBA going up. NFL not so good on social justice issues, NBA much better.
No, it's not that the NFL is not good on social justice issues. It's that they allowed it in the first place. Their brand is different. You can have different brands, and that's what dictates your success. When you allow yourself to go off brand, that's what's going to start to determine your future success or lack thereof. The NFL's brand is appealing to conservative Caucasians in middle America. That's their brand. The NBA's brand is appealing to liberals that are located mostly along the coastlines, the West Coast, the East Coast, and, down in Florida region. They have two totally different brands. And, a lot of times their markets intersect, but they have two separate brands, so therefore they have two separate focuses.
I'm not saying it's causal. Correlation does not equal causality. I get it. I just want to point out that the NFL makes it a causal argument about Kaepernick and the protests. And those who are against the protests and say everyone should stand for the anthem in the NFL are making a causal argument that they simply can't make. There's as much evidence to suggest that the owner's reaction to Kaepernick is driving fans away as there is that the protest itself is driving fans away.
I agree, but I agree from a different perspective. What you're alleging is that due to the fact that the owners won't bring Kaepernick back, that's leading to a downturn in the NFL. There's no substantiation for that. Where I believe that the owners heavily incriminate themselves is that they did not nip this in the bud when they should have, which is immediately. He should have been cut immediately by the 49ers. And a lot of the pro-blacks are going to get mad when I say that. But Colin Kaepernick is not a solution-oriented individual. He's very confused. And he's going to confuse a lot of you simpletons out there who call yourself pro-black, because none of you guys are solution-oriented. Most of you guys are hung up in your emotions and want to blame the so-called white man for everything. Is there a level of culpability from the so-called white community? Absolutely. On the elite level, absolutely. But it has to start with us, because you can't worry about changing others. We got to change ourselves, period. And then once we're able to refine how we're supposed to conduct ourselves, then we can move on to these other issues.
And there's much more evidence to suggest that other things are driving fans away, including cord cutting and a host of other reasons. And yet, people who are against Kaepernick in the protest frequently, Stephen A., you have brought up the bottom line and how the owners protect their bottom line. And my point is, that's their intuition, which is probably buttressed by their, life experiences, the kind of people they are, almost all white, old men.
Okay, just like the NBA is all white, old men, other than Michael Jordan. Once again, they love to push this narrative about the NBA being filled with owners that are so liberal. Most of these owners are conservative. Once again, they just understand their market. You must understand who you're selling your wares to. Period. I mean, other than Michael Jordan and Vivek Ranadive, how many non-Caucasian owners are there in the NBA? How many? I mean, now you may have certain quote-unquote minority owners associated with different franchises, but the vast majority of them are Caucasian, and most of them have the same political affiliations as the NFL owners. The difference is they understand who their market is. So this is what Max Kellerman is missing, and I really suspect that this is all a cover for his frustration that the NFL has not conformed to the attempt to socially engineer its business through Colin Kaepernick. He wants the NFL owners to sign Kaepernick so that they can put a nice little liberal ribbon on this storyline. It's not going to happen because, once again, their market in the NFL is different from the market in the NBA. He's attributing it completely to, well, maybe the NFL owners, due to how they were raised, they don't understand Kaepernick. You have to also understand that they're probably receiving, all these franchises are receiving thousands of emails a day from their constituency, their viewership, telling them, how could you have allowed this to happen in the first place?
And so their kind of intuition is that, because they don't have hard evidence, is we got to stop the protests because it's bad for our bottom line. I'm sorry, the evidence is not that it's causal, any more so than me saying, hey, NFL, see how the NBA is ascending? It's a result of their reaction to social justice.
No, the NBA is ascending because of the fact that they know how to market their stars. That's basically that. The social justice stuff has a very, very small impact on their ascendancy. It's because they have a certain amount of stars that they know how to market. Plus, the NBA has done a phenomenal job of creating global markets for its brand.
But I will say, Stephen A., that those two things are correlated, that we can make a correlation. Look at the NBA. It's ascending, and look at how they deal with these kind of issues.
Well, I'm not going to refute the correlation. I'm not going to deny that at all. I'm just prioritizing. And I'm going to prioritize the life of a guy like Stephon Clark, who's in his backyard, and he ends up shot and killed by police, where they shoot in his direction 20 times. Lord knows how many bullets hit him.
8. You should do some research before you start talking too much, Stephen A. Smith. Let me say this very quickly, brothers. You cannot count on the cops to prioritize your life. Let's prioritize our own lives. When we leave our homes, let's move with a purpose. Let's stop hanging out so much on the corners. Let's stop chilling out so much, always on a project bench, talking shit and oftentimes looking for trouble. Just being real. Stop hanging out in front of the corner store all the time. All right? Have somewhere to go and go there. Go home and read a book. Chill out with your son. Right? Teach your daughter something. That will keep us out of a lot of dumb trouble. Okay? Am I saying that it's okay that they shot at Stephon Clark 20 times? No, I'm not saying that. But let's look within ourselves so that we can avoid some of the silly shit. Because a lot of the things that the so-called black man gets into are silly.
That is entirely different than Colin Kaepernick.
The 20 times, sorry, I need to stop for a second. It's just so sickening.
The 20 times. And, you know, the
gun
rights activists.
Yeah, I know, Molly. You don't want a black man to get shot at 20 times. You want a black man to shoot on you 20 times.
And gun rights
But
activists
how
and all this stuff.
unnecessary?
They'll point to a magazine and how you can just touch on the trigger and it'll, I don't know. The point is, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. In the case of Colin Kaepernick, we're talking about an individual, as righteous as he may be to some respect.
Colin Kaepernick is righteous now? Really? Why? Because he has a big afro? I laugh at all. It's so easy to manipulate the so-called black community. This is a guy who really had no experience growing up around so-called black people until he went to college and he joined the Kappa Alpha Psi. And that's truly what that getting down on one knee is an allusion to. It's his association with Kappa Alpha Psi. That's why that old man, Bill Russell, that sun worshiper himself, that's why he got down on one knee, claiming that he was doing it for Stephon Clark. No, you wasn't. You was doing it to show your allegiance to Kappa Alpha Psi because you're a member of that fraternity, Bill Russell. Okay? They venerate Tahuti, who is Kush. They venerate Apollo in the Kappa Alpha Psi.
Who's played professional football, isn't protesting against the National Football League, and has collected in excess of $40 million in his career, as opposed to this young man who's no longer alive.
Stephen A., for what issue? Here's the thing. Colin Kaepernick was protesting this very issue.
Right.
When you ask Kaepernick in the beginning, forget about all the underlying systemic injustices, he started out by talking about police interactions and brutality in the community.
One must ask Colin Kaepernick, how many issues of police brutality has he seen with his own eyes or been the quote-unquote victim of? As a matter of fact, I think that the police treated him very well when Tiana Taylor accused him of rape or sexual assault, whatever it was. People forget his history before he decided to become woke. He was known as the guy who was out here slaying bitches. Every black chick he ran into, he was slaying them all throughout the industry. His former girlfriend was Tiana Taylor, who's known now, of course, for being married to or associated with, I'm not sure if they're married to, if she's married to him, Mr. Iman Shumpert, formerly of the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have a baby together. Before that, she was with Colin Kaepernick, and she alleges that he set her up to be sexually assaulted. So I wonder if he felt like he was treated well by the cops when that whole situation transpired. Police brutality is an issue, and of course, when you see a situation like Philando Castile, that of course obviously is a heinous situation. But we have a lot of problems. The police brutality issue is low on the totem pole of problems that our people have. Number one problem is the so-called black man has to understand what his role is and what his job is.
Exactly. He started, but that was my whole point, Matt. But that's my whole point. He was talking about the right things. He started out that way, and then the issue got convoluted and ultimately distracted, and we started hearing from everybody but him. See, one of the things that
Well, you were hearing from everybody but him because he refused to speak, Stephen A. Smith. Whose fault is that? Why was it that he was so scared to speak? Maybe it was because he knew that he really had nothing to say in person. He's not a leader. He was known as not being a leader when he was the starting quarterback for the 49ers. He was on his way out of the NFL. That's why it's so amazing that he's become this cause celebre in the mainstream liberal media. Everybody's holding Colin Kaepernick back. He was on his way out of the NFL. He got beat out by Blaine Gabbert for starting quarterback. Like, give me a break. And he's the one who declined the extension on his contract.
that I do every chance I get. I don't get to do it very often, but I listen to my man Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, in the morning on Urban View, channel 126. I listen to my girl Karen Hunter. She's got a page, Karen Hunter Show, and it's a...
Yeah, Karen Hunter, another liberal black female who hates so-called black men, who's utilizing the deaths of black men to advance her own profile and status. Once again, brothers, the liberal black woman don't give a shit about you. The lesbian black woman don't give a shit about you. Is that they know that they must utilize your energy to gain attention for themselves. That's what it's about.
And it's a category they'll never forget. And it's a slew of African Americans that have lost their lives at the hands of law enforcement. And
make a category called Never Forget, according to or pertaining to the 14 million plus black fetuses that have been killed by liberal black females when they've been aborted. Make a category called Never Forget about that shit.
And so again, whether it's as prevalent as some people say or not, here's the bottom line. When white folks find themselves in situations, it appears, when they find themselves in situations, they end up getting arrested. When black folks don't even find themselves in a situation, they end up dead.
That's alleged. We still don't know what Mr. Stephon Clark was doing. Here's what I do know. The helicopter camera caught him climbing over other people's fences. That's what I know. Look, brothers, there's nothing that's going to bring that man back. I make videos so that you brothers that are still alive can make better decisions. You never know what could happen in life. You could walk out in the street. You could be mistaken for somebody else. Somebody could shoot you. A cop could kill you. These are things that can happen in life. But all this circular rhetoric is not getting our people anywhere. And the solution starts with you, so-called black man, and how you choose to view yourself. How you view yourself is going to determine how you conduct yourself, and how you conduct yourself is going to heavily determine what you get into.
You got people in South Carolina that, 9 folks got gunned down. That person was alive, and ultimately there's a shooting that takes place in Parkland. That shooter's alive. Somehow, some way, white folks who commit the most heinous crimes as of recently end up getting arrested.
Maybe because they're government assets, Stephen A. Smith. Rabbit holes a little deeper than you may understand, brother.
Whereas black folks who ain't even committed crimes are ending up dead. That is a problem.
Let me also say this. America is perpetuated off of the blood of the so-called black man as a sacrifice. Okay? Please understand, once again, the god of this society is Heru/Tammuz/Apollo. He demands blood sacrifice. The blood of the so-called black man is valued more than the other races because they know who we are according to scripture. Okay?
And right. That is a huge disparity, and there's something that needs to be said about that.
There's a higher tolerance for dead black people than white people in this country. That's pretty obvious. Okay. Black life has been cheap compared to white life, and that is compared to others, and that is the point of Black Lives Matter, and that's why.
No, it's not. If you want to know what the point of Black Lives Matter is, go on their website. They'll tell you. Point blank, they'll tell you. It's to promote discordianism, to exalt the transgender, to exalt the female as a mother goddess principle. to especially establish the black lesbian as some form of authority figure in the so-called black community. Those are their basic tenets. And then when you want to go on a higher level, they talk about reparations and liberating so-called political prisoners, which is all bullshit. But it feeds into their racialist altar. But like I always tell you, brothers, the main altar of the liberal female in general and the liberal black woman in particular is that she is a feminist. All right? Okay? And they're going to do whatever they can to promote the feminine principle. Homosexuality, transgenderism, feminism, that's all part and parcel to the feminine principle to a degree.
There was a lot of commotion when the idea was, well, all lives matter, because it misses the point. Implicitly, all lives matter. It's that thus far some have mattered less than others, and that's precisely what Black Lives Matter is addressing. And that's why Renedive's position, what he said before the game, this alliance with Black Lives Matter, is excellent. It's good for the NBA. The idea that social justice is bad somehow for major sports leagues, which is essentially the position that many in the NFL take, is simply incorrect.
Yep.
No, it's correct based on you understanding who your market is.
Yep, we collectively applaud this effort, and it kicks off tomorrow night in Sacramento, a star-studded event. If you want more information, you can go to buildblack.org for all the details.
And by the way, just as a point to end this, we're not just talking about civil rights here, we're talking about human rights.
Of course.
That's one of the transitions that Malcolm X made in the latter part of his life. Once upon a time, he was fighting for civil rights. And then all of a sudden, it evolved and transcended to human rights.
Yes, because Malcolm X went to Mecca, and he got an understanding that Islam is a globalist religion, and that's how he ended his life, pursuing globalism. A lot of brothers don't grasp that. But once again, that is why you're not supposed to be venerating or worshiping men, because they alter their views based off of their concept of reality. Many people don't grasp that about Malcolm X. He ended his life as a globalist. All right? Much like Muhammad Ali ended his life as a globalist.
That's what we're talking about here, because young black men are losing their lives.
Of course. You're supposed to feel safe when you see police officers, not be scared. Coming up.
But anyway, that's it on that, brothers. We'll see how far they take this narrative with Mr. Stephon Clark. Once again, your empowerment starts within you. Please understand that how you're treated is going to be directly correlated with how you treat yourself, and how you treat yourself is going to be directly correlated with how you view yourself. So when you view yourself as a king, you'll conduct yourself accordingly. And then the other races, they won't have an option but to start considering you according to how you view yourself and treat yourself. But anyway, peace.